Hello, this is BN223 assignment 2. This is our group today who will be making a presentation about electronic wearables. Wearable technology has been around for decades. As the first wearable technology was invented back in 1955, Sony invented the first ever transistor radio, the Sony TR-55, which is served as a portable gadget for use. The first ever wearable watch that was made was actually made by Pulsar in 1975. This was a wearable calculator wristwatch. In 1977, Hewlett Packard, which now is HP, introduced its first ever calculator watch, which sold around 850 USD at the time. It wasn't until the early 2000s where wearable technology begun to gain popularity. In the early 2000s, wearable technology such as Fitbits, Nike, and the Apple iPod. This wasn't the only wearable technology released in the 2000s. The GoPro, the first ever wearable action camera, was released in 2004. In 2013, the wearable technology started to explode in popularity with the introduction of the Google Glass and the new Fitbit Flex and Force. This was also followed by the Apple Watch in 2015 and the Oculus headset in 2016.
So why is it important to protect these? Well, given with the modern era where basically people always advance with technologies, wearables have become a big part of our lives where a lot of people will be using them. And what makes it so important to protect them is because those things are connected to a lot of things. They can able to pick up lots of data from all different points that, if basically breached by somebody or someone else, could be quite bad. So the important things that we need to account for is we need to make sure it prevents sensitive information from being used against each other. So if you're outside on a call or something and you're connected to some sort of stuff, you don't want somebody jumping in and taking your personal data. Of course, we want a thwart of identity and theft impersonation. It's exactly what I just said. Someone is jumping in, they've taken your position, but it's not actually you. We want to prevent health metrics from being sold to organizations who may benefit. You can find this in a lot of things like pacemakers and stuff where medical needs are listed. We also want to stop eavesdropping on entertainment. So we don't want someone to slip into a session that you're in when you're trying to enjoy something and they're basically watching you. And finally, we just want to allow for safer operations of the equipment. So we want to make sure that when it's used safely and it's used under the user's basically awareness. They know what's going on. They don't want anything hidden beneath the ice. On to the next slide.
Yeah, so for our different examples of like security risks for wearable devices, our first risk is Bluetooth low energy spoofing, which is when a hacker is able to disrupt the connection between a mobile phone and a smartwatch and insert themselves in between as the man in the middle. And they do this using a problem with the re-authentication with the devices, and it causes the ability for the hacker to be able to see all the information that's moving across the two devices and be able to input their own information, which is a really dangerous privacy and security risk that needs to be monitored and safely taken care of. On to the next slide. We have Bluetooth packet tracing, which is another security risk and is a tool that hackers use against wearable devices. And that's where unencrypted data is moving across between the smartwatch and the phone. And all the hacker needs to do is use a packet tracing software with a mount for Bluetooth devices to be able to pick up all that data information that's going back and forth between the two of them. And that is a really dangerous risk that needs to be covered with encryption to be able to protect it. And the last one is the encryption on the smartwatch itself. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see that there is quite a few vulnerable characteristics that can be accessed by a hacker without a phone connection to the device that can be used against the user. So say your watch gets stolen, which can happen, and you haven't put a password on it. The hacker gets all this information, even if it's not connected to your phone, which is a massive security risk. And the tools that the hacker needs to do this is extremely minimal. And that's why this is such a problem and needs to be dealt with, because it ruins the privacy and security of the user.
So these attacks can happen for all sorts of reasons, whether they're malicious or just plain a coincidence. It can have all sorts of varying different impacts. So some of the main techniques, well, not techniques, but some of the things that can be done against these kind of attacks, we could use systems like strong symmetric key encryption to secure packets traveling between devices like over the network, for instance. So for instance, for watch and phone syncing, we can make sure that all like contacts, call records, even pictures in galleries of the various types of data is protected and secured at all times in each stage of transmission. Regular security patches are also really helpful to prevent instances like leaky sort of Bluetooth low energy devices such as the Fitbit. So if these things are nipped in the bud as soon as possible, then it will prevent further attacks from happening on these devices and ultimately leading to a more secure experience. In terms of authentication for devices, two-factor authentication is a really good tool, which is a strong tool since two techniques or devices need to be able to act upon specific requests. So whether that be an SMS message and an email, either one of these things, if they're not available, you won't be able to get access. So that's a really strong tool to be used, to prevent these kind of attacks. And moving on to the conclusion.
So concluding, with the results, it's seen that wearable devices have grown over time from being calculator watches all the way to smartwatches that can monitor your heart rate, song selection, oxygen levels, and the user's environmental surroundings. Security systems that are now in place in protecting your systems, including password protection, phone encryption, and spoofing protection by authentication upon reconnection with your wearable device instead of automatic connections. Although this may be slower than normal, it protects the user's information, which is key. Apple, Fitbit, and Samsung Galaxy all use these user security protection tools to safely secure the information at hand. Wearable devices can pose a risk to many different social engineering attacks, as well as data harvesting and current location exposure if the attacker gains access into that specific wearable device. For example, if an attacker grants access into a user's Fitbit smartwatch, they would be able to have access to their movements over the past couple months. It also grants access to bank accounts, health results, and the user's accounts. In Google Fit, they keep your movements for more than a year. Wearable devices should be monitored by security application software in the future to maintain the level of scrutiny and accessibility of devices in the future.